All right, everybody, it's a new week, and every other week we do this show called Brush Hour, and here we are for another new episode. And today we're talking about something that I love, which is foliage brushes. Why do I love foliage brushes? Let's go through some of the reasons why they're great. One, they save you time. Okay, one of the things we love about making digital art is efficiency, saving time on repetitive tasks and so on. And foliage brushes can get you a long way there when it comes to saving time. And also, depending on what kind of work you do, using these brushes can be exactly the thing you need to get an image done just for the purposes of showing, say, a client an idea for something. Like if you're a concept artist and you need to fill in a whole bunch of trees in the distance, or some grass, or some ground cover, etc. These kinds of brushes go such a long way in helping you to communicate your vision for something while saving you literally hours of time. So that's one thing, saving time. The other thing, the variety. You can make so many different cool foliage brushes, and you can also make them very quickly once you have a kind of a template that works for you. And we want to get people using the right kind of a template. So I'm going to show you some tricks of the trade for making sure that the brushes that you make are going to play nicely and behave the way you want them to behave, okay? The other great thing too is making these brushes in Photoshop, foliage, in Photoshop is it allows you to take advantage of certain tricks that Photoshop's brush engine, brush settings will allow you to do. And these things are color jitter, for example, which we'll go into, and being able to control the size of the stamp, the brush stamp, and how you're painting with a size dynamics and also size jitter, and we're going to look at that as well. So there's really a lot that can be done here, and we're going to dive right in. I want to start by first talking about the importance of reference. So there are so many different kinds of leaves to start with, and on the here on the left, you see I have this little image, British tree leaves. This is just some leaves that you'll see on trees in England, right? To the right, a few tropical ones, but there are just hundreds more. And it's great to just go out there on the internet and find some reference for yourself so that you have some shapes to play around with and some ideas for shapes for creating these brushes. And this does, of course, this leaves out the larger brushes that you want to make for things like painting trees that are off in a distance, where you need clumps of leaves and things like that. So that's a different category, as well as things like grasses and whatnot. But just for the brushes where you're doing more detail work, it's important to vary the shape and to have a shape that really feels like something you might see out there in the real world. So gather yourself some reference and make sure you take advantage of that. So we're going to come over here, and I'm just going to turn these off. I want to look at this little guy here on the left, okay? You see I have a blue box with a line running horizontally through the center of that box. And I'm just going to hide our plants here for a moment. I want to talk about the importance of this blue box for when you yourself are creating some foliage brushes. Now, what this box is here to do is to ensure for us that we create a brush that when you paint with it, let me show you an example. Here is my one of the brushes from my Oz brush set, which was done as a fundraiser last year. No longer available, but that's okay. You can recreate these kind of brushes on your own. But I want you to see what happens when I draw with this. 1 second here. Notice that even though the leaves will flop and switch sides, okay? And that's being done with our good friend here in Shape Dynamics, Flip X Jitter, okay? It's telling me along the X-axis, I want to flip my brush stamp randomly, okay? Slide that over here so I can leave my brush settings panel open for everybody to see. Notice how, regardless of the fact that it's switching back and forth, our stem of the brush running through the center remains fixed and does not jump to the left or to the right. This is an important thing when you're designing foliage brushes, because you want to allow something like this to happen, what you're seeing when I do a curve or draw in any specific direction. If there is a stem and you have leaves on either side of that stem and you want that stem to carry through and not look like it's getting broken, one of the tricks for making that work is to create yourself a little template like this where you have a center line, all right? And you're going to make sure that you place your center line and design your stamp laying on its side with the stem running along that center line. So as a demonstration, why don't we just go ahead and do that? I'll go ahead and grab a regular old brush for drawing. So may as well just use my draw along brush. And if this is my center line, I can put my stem there. And then if I were to make some leaves on either side, what I want to do is I want to ensure that the leaves will touch both the top and bottom borders of my my bounding box. Alrighty, so very simple. We're not doing anything fancy here. I'm just going to demonstrate this in the simplest way possible. There's a leaf, and there's a leaf. Okay. Now, once I have two leaves that touch the borders, I know that this is going to be the total height of my stamp from the top to the bottom. I know where the center is. Now, anything in the middle, I can just do what I want. Okay. It's not going to bother with getting out to the borders and so on. Okay. All right. Now, why don't we hide our outline for a moment and look at this brush stamp. And I'm now going to say, okay, edit, define brush preset. We'll just call this simple leaf. And right away, Photoshop will assign that stamp to my brush, okay? And the very next thing we do, and remember, this is the simplest way to go. This is really sort of the foundation for creating these kinds of brushes, is we're going to come over here to Shape Dynamics and turn that on for a second. And the first thing I do is I go to Angle Jitter, and I turn on Direction. Angle Jitter, Direction. This is telling me that whichever way I move, okay, with my stylus, whichever direction I go, the stamp is going to rotate accordingly and follow along with that direction. And I'm going to next come over here to spacing. This is under brush tip shape here. And I'm just going to increase the spacing, okay? And I'll zoom out of here for a second. Let me actually just draw straight up there. I'm holding down the shift key to do that. Now, what I'm demonstrating here by drawing straight up is you'll notice that everything lines up correctly. And the problem people have is when they go and turn on that flip X jitter, which I'll do here. Pardon me, flip Y jitter. There we go. Flip Y jitter is now, even though the brush is going to rotate and flip, gotta make sure it does that actually. There we go. You'll notice here it doesn't align perfectly. So with my drawing, I had a little bit of an issue with the width or the height not being 100% perfect within the boundaries of that box. Okay, and that's how you'll catch yourself. You'll try a demonstration like this and you'll say, oh, whoops, something wasn't 100% aligned. But regardless, this is close enough to give you an idea of how this is supposed to work. So even though I turn on that flip jitter, okay, where it's actually taking the brush stamp and it's just flipping it, you can do it horizontally or vertically, which is the X and Y axes. You're still going to get pretty good alignment. Now, if I had taken my time and done it mathematically and made sure to get everything right down to the pixel, you would not see any bump whatsoever in that stem, which is what we saw with the Oz brush I was using a moment ago, right? That brush does it very nicely. Of course, for those brushes which I developed for actual consumption, for people to actually use them for purposes that are professional and whatnot, you want that to be working out better. Now, you are going to get things that jump if you make a curve that is too severe. See that? But everyone knows that's one of the limitations of making these kinds of brushes, and that's totally fine, right? You just learn how to work with them. But good result there. And also it's tied to pen pressure for size. So how do I get that to happen? Well, remember, you just come over to Shape Dynamics, turn on pen pressure for your control, and you can set the diameter for the minimum diameter to be whatever you like. Okay, there you go. But jumping back to where we were a moment ago, let's jump back. And that brush we were just playing with, here it is. Go back to our brush settings. So we have our flip Y jitter. Let's turn on pen pressure to control the diameter. And now you can see we can do things like this, right? And that automatically makes things a bit more interesting, doesn't it? You can control the spacing. You can push it tighter if you like, right? And that's going to give you a tighter line like that. It will wind up getting the leaves closer to one another as well, which may be what you want. Alrighty. And now I want to talk about something that doesn't get taken advantage of enough when you are designing custom brushes, and that is roundness jitter. Roundness jitter. And you'll find it here also in Shape Dynamics right towards the bottom. What an interesting feature this is. Essentially what it's going to do, I'll show you a very simple demonstration, is this. Imagine I have a very simple brush stamp, okay? That is a circle. When I apply roundness jitter, I'm going to tell Photoshop that I want my stamp to go from its full height, like this, okay, to a squished version of itself. And depending on how much roundness jitter I apply, how much I play with those settings, right? I can make it so that it can get all the way down to essentially 1 pixel or 1% of its total height, right? And or back up to its regular size, okay? And it can vary randomly throughout the stroke. All right, so let's take a look at what that means for an actual brush, right? This brush that we're using right here. We'll go up to our brush settings, Shape Dynamics, Roundness Jitter. Now, the moment I turn that on, when it's at 0, you're not going to see anything happening here with minimum roundness. But the moment I turn that on, okay, look at this. Minimum roundness, I can set it to be all the way down to, say, 5%, which is going to be really skinny. And I'm going to control it with pen pressure, okay? If you have no jitter assigned, all it means is that with minimal pressure, I'm going to get a very skinny version of it, and I can turn off my size jitter so you can see this more accurately. See that? It's taking that stamp and it is compressing it. Remember that I developed the stamp on its side, facing to the right, and it's taking it and it's squishing it from the top and the bottom, okay? And so you get this very skinny stamp like that. And let's turn back on our pen pressure. I'll increase the minimum diameter a little bit. And I'll increase the minimum roundness to say something a little bit more useful or practical, like 20%. Now, this means that with pen pressure, light pressure means skinnier, heavier pressure means not so skinny. Now, what I want to do is turn off this pen pressure control and turn roundness jitter on. Because what I want to happen is I want actually for this to occur randomly. I don't want it to have anything to do when it's tied to pen pressure. Pen pressure is simply going to control the size of my brush, okay? And so what will happen is occasionally, and I can increase this to 100%, occasionally I'll get a skinny stamp. If you look over here, right there, you can see that that's getting really, really skinny, right? Okay, and that is going to allow me to have even more of a random look to the stroke that I'm painting with that brush. All right. There we go. So I've got leaves flipping left and right. And I've also got the roundness jitter being applied so that I'm getting a range of 100% of the height of that stamp all the way down to 20% of the total height of that stamp. And that's going to give me more variety. Okay, so we've just covered a lot of stuff in the first 15 minutes here. But this is the basics. These are the building blocks for creating these kinds of brushes. And there's more to come. But first I want to stop and see if we have any questions from our lovely audience, people watching. And I want to say hello to folks. Thank you for watching, Dorina and Nijin and Laura and Joan and Tim is here and Judith and Steve and Tolu Lope and who else is here? Sean, what's up, Sean? Nice to see you. And Murray's here. Thanks everybody for watching. Let me see, do we have any questions? Yes, you can create this brush in Photoshop and you can add it to your Fresco library. Absolutely, Laura. Yes, in fact, what you do is, whatever brush you make, just come over to Window, Libraries, okay? And just create yourself a brand new library if you like for that brush, or you can add it to an existing library, and those libraries will automatically just show up in Fresco because they're tied to your user account. So any libraries you create, boom, they just show up and you're all set to go. Okay, hope that answers that for you. How do you get capture images into Fresco? Judith, you can get capture vector shapes into Fresco. You can get capture brushes into Fresco too, simply by saving them to a library. What else? Let's see. All right, I don't see, oh, is it important to create the brush horizontally? Clarissa, you can create it vertically, but then if you want to have it tied to the direction that you're moving your stylus, go ahead and rotate it 90 degrees clockwise so that it will then be saved as a stamp in that orientation and will move along in the direction that you want it to go, okay? That is especially important for creating these kinds of foliage brushes, which is why I set up the document that way to begin with. Let's look at our outline again here. Okay, so another quick example, and this time I'm going to use a solid shape because I want to do something a bit more practical, okay? Let's come over to our brushes, and I'm going to go, and I'm going to use something that's got a bit more flavor, a bit more texture to it, okie dokie. Let's start with my ink box. And let's see, so many great choices, so fun, so fun. I'll use the brush pen wow brush to do this. All right, so this one's going to be a bit grittier. And I'm going to create a few leaves here. I'm looking at this center line and I'm just, you know, keeping in mind that that's sort of what I want to pay attention to here. I know that this is coming up right to the edge, which is good. And I want one more leaf that's going to do that. So here I'm going to draw one that's going to come up and over and down right to about there. A little bigger. There we go. Bit of texture in there. It's always fun. All right. And then I'm going to just hint at a stem. Okay, so here in the center, it's going to have a few little bits and pieces. Like that. All right. And finally, I'm going to use now, you have the latest versions of Photoshop, holding down the tilde key. That's the key that looks like this on your keyboard. Holding that down temporarily makes your brush into an eraser. So I'm just gonna pull out a bit in the center of each of these leaves here. Okay. And now if you don't have a later version or you don't have a tilde key, don't worry, you can come up to your brush's mode and set it to clear, and that'll also instantly turn it into an eraser while it retains all of the cool stuff that that brush does on its own. I'm gonna hide my outline for a second, and here's my new stamp, and I'm just gonna say edit, define brush preset. Okay, new one. All right, now here's our brush. Let's run through some of the things that we already talked about. I'm gonna open up my brush settings panel. I'm going to increase my spacing a little bit. Okay, come to shape dynamics, turn on pen pressure. So I've got some smaller and bigger leaves I can make. I'm gonna turn size jitter on this time, okay, so that the randomness of the size will also be applied at a value of 30%. I'm gonna turn on roundness jitter, okay, about 40 or 50%. Let's go all the way up to 50, why not? Flip Y jitter, so the leaves will bounce back and forth. That stamp will get flipped randomly. And finally, under angle control, I'm gonna set it to direction, okay? I'll zoom out and let's take a look at how this works. Okay, this could be pretty practical, right? So in just a couple minutes, we made this little brush. All right. Not bad. So let's look at our main stamp again. The one thing I don't like is that this part of the stem winds up getting sort of in the way of it feeling like it's repeating in a way where it doesn't get too falling off that vertical a little bit, you know? So I'm gonna take some of that away and save a new stamp. Okay. And I'm just going to find that brush I was using a second ago. Oops, wrong one. Hang on a second. Here we go. There's the one I was using a moment ago. And I'm going to come over to my brush settings, and I'm just going to locate that brush stamp. Now you see I have way too many, of course, because that's what I do all day is make brushes. There it is. And here's the one right next to it, find that I just created. I'm just going to switch it to that one and increase that spacing again. Okay. A little more than that. There we go. And now I'm not going to have to deal so much with that stem doing something I didn't like. That seems to be a little better there. Increase it just a hair more. You know, you can play with this stuff all day. But what I wanted to show you was with a solid color like this, okay, this brush it's basically filled in, right? And you can see how nice that is to get a little bit of variation in the width and so on, right? That roundness jitter, we could even pull that down even a bit further, pump up that roundness jitter, pump up that size jitter a bit. Okay, we've got our flip X, that looks good. But with a solid color fill, okay, there's some pretty nifty things you can do with, drum roll please, and this is our pro tip for the day. We are talking about one of my favorite things, which we talk about a lot, and that is what? But color dynamics. Color dynamics are going to make a big difference here because we have a solid stamp, okay? Check it out. So, on the left, okay, we have example 1. Let us come over to the right with color dynamics turned on. We are going to increase the hue jitter by a factor of maybe like 5, but the brightness jitter I'm really going to crank up to 10. Right, it's going to be a big one. There we go. Alrighty, and now for comparison, let's check it out. Zoom in, and you will see subtle differences in the hue and the value of each of those successive stamps that are being applied to the canvas. This goes a huge, long way in creating realism and interest in the foliage that you paint, okay? Now, just to really pump this up and demonstrate the power of this, I'm going to brighten up my color a bunch, and I'm going to show you another example there. With those values turned much higher, you can really see what a difference this makes. You can see how every stamp, instance of that stamp, is shifting its hue and its value, its brightness, okay, as you paint. That is the magic and power of color dynamics, right? And don't forget, you can, with color dynamics, work with both your foreground and background colors, kind of like magic. So here's my foreground color, alrighty? Open up my background color. I'm going to sample that one, and I'm just going to come down to a much darker color like that, okay? And now I'm going to turn down these hue and brightness jitter because those aren't going to matter so much. I'm going to come over here to my foreground background jitter control, set it to pen pressure. And don't forget, folks, all these brush hour shows are archived on Behance and on YouTube. So if there's anything that I'm doing here where you're like trying to keep up and you say, wait, slow down, don't worry. They are immediately saved. You can watch them right back the moment they're done. And then you can watch them again later because they will be saved. They are always there for your reference. So I turn on pen pressure. What this means is when I use heavier pressure with my stylus, okay, my foreground color is going to dominate. When I use lighter pressure, my background color is going to dominate, which means anything in between foreground and background is going to show up when I use medium pressure. Does that make sense? So check it out. Heavy pressure, light pressure. All right. And I'm going to turn off this or reduce my shape dynamics for a minute. I want you to see light pressure, heavy pressure. See how I went from dark to light? Okay. Now, let's go a little crazy. We'll make our foreground color sort of a bright yellow, and our background color a nice rich dark green. Okay? And then I'm going to use medium pressure. Look what happens. Just get a whole variety of colors like that. Now, let's decrease our spacing and get denser foliage. And let's turn on scattering by, we're going to have 2 counts. That means 2 stamps per instance of the stamping occurring, okay, when I'm painting. And I'm going to turn on scattering. Alrighty. And we're going to make our background color a brighter green. Foreground color is going to be like a lemony yellow. Okay. Heavy pressure, what do I get? Heavy pressure gives me that yellowy color, right? Lighter, heavier pressure. I can basically build on top of the darks with the lights and do a nice little clump of leaves like this in a matter of seconds, okay? I don't know if that's the most elegant example of what I'm trying to show you, but I think it makes the point that using the color dynamics in this way, or using color dynamics at all, is going to make a huge difference in what you're able to paint with a single brush. And when you turn on scattering, of course, you're going to cover more ground. So if this is one of those instances where you have something that you need to paint that's more in the middle ground or in the background, you could very quickly, and let's go ahead and make this even darker. Okay. You could just paint a bunch of leaves in the background here. And then you can go over the top areas with heavier pressure to pull out some of those lights. Okay? Like that. Another thing you can do is you can turn off direction. I'm going to turn it off for a moment. And I got to take my brush stamp and rotate it this way. Okay, so I've rotated it 90 degrees counterclockwise. And because there's nothing controlling the direction, I can basically just scrub up and down and up and down and just scrub around on my canvas, right, for a really quick fill. So here, if I use light pressure, I'll get a darker color, right? Okay. I'll go ahead and increase our shape dynamics, size jitter. Throw that all in there. Then use heavier pressure to come over that. And before you know it, you've got a bunch of plants off in the distance there doing their thing. You could even turn on angle jitter, maybe a factor of like 4 or 5%. Okay, what's that going to do? Well, look at the difference. Now, everything is going to angle slightly off to the left, slightly off to the right. Okay? And again, this is making my life a lot easier, adding some nice variety. Okay, get some darker and lighter bits and pieces. Voila, all set. Alrighty, so handy stuff. Let's see. Yes, Tim, you'll get disco leaves if you crank the slider for color dynamics hue to 100, and that'll look crazy. Is there a bamboo brush? Yeah, absolutely, Christine. You know, you can make your own, but there certainly are bamboo brushes out there you can find. But yeah, make your own. Why not? You know, we've got our little outline. It's very easy to do. You know, just grab a nice brush and get your bamboo leaves. Going, right? That's pretty much it, right? Isn't that kind of bamboo-ish looking? Bamboo-ish, I don't think that's a word. But, you know, here's a quick and dirty, sloppy slopola amateur hour bamboo brush for you. Okay. Ta-da. Make sure that we're staying inside our boundaries here. Hopefully this will work. I just say edit, define brush preset, cheap bamboo. Let's look at our spacing here. And we'll go to our shape dynamics, set that to direction. Need a bit less spacing, I guess. There we go. Something like that. And a bit of roundness jitter. And let's see how we did. Yeah, whatever. Could be better, obviously. Spend a little time on it and make it good. But hopefully we're sort of doing what we want there. So these areas where it overlaps, that's easy to fix. You simply take your original stamp, which was there, and you can either add some stem to the top over here. Or you could, you know, erase away a bit of this, and you could just do what you want. Make this just kind of fit better. Okay. Go ahead and edit that. Define pattern, bamboo. And come back to our brush settings. So am I using the same stamp? Let's see. Brush tip shape. Oh, it didn't save it. Hang on. Edit, define pattern. Oh, that's because I did define pattern. Whoops. My mistake. Turn that back on. And turn that on, and turn that on, and come here, and we increase our spacing. And we do our direction. And I think we're in good shape now. Let's see. Hopefully that kind of helped. Yeah. Okay. And you know, that was a quick and dirty example. All right, so let's look at the bigger stuff. You want to paint grass. You want to paint trees off in the distance. Okay, you want to paint clumps of stuff. Well, why don't we look at some examples of some of the brushes that have been created that do that and break them down looking at their settings. All right. In fact, good news for all of you. The summer 2021 brushes are right around the corner. They should be out in about 2 or 3 weeks. And the summer 2021 brushes have some grass brushes and some other foliage brushes in there for you. So let's look at the ones that you would use for more of the foreground, like blades. Okay, there's a brush called blades, and let's just look at how that one behaves. See that? Okay, now I'm painting some nice grass. So how does this work? Well, you can see that stamp right there, right, as I hover over the screen. So the stamp is comprised of 5 blades of grass, each with their own shape to them. And now that you've been learning about creating these brushes, you can probably guess how this works. Let's look at the brush settings. Under Shape Dynamics, why is the angle jitter, or angle control rather, turned to off? Why do we have nothing here? Well, we want this brush to stay in its basic orientation of the bottom to the top, okay, being always in the same place, so I can literally just scrub around on my canvas, and the brush is going to remain in that fixed position, okay? However, it isn't totally fixed because we have angle jitter set to 4%. So it'll sway a little bit, rotate rather, a little bit counterclockwise or a little bit clockwise by a value of 4%. That's very, very little. Okay, but it's just enough to give some nice variety. We have our size jitter, pen pressure. Okay, so pen pressure controlling it, size jitter 40%. So that size jitter means that the size will randomly fluctuate by a value of 40%. However, pen pressure is also tied as a control to your stylus, which means that with heavier pressure, I am going to get larger blades, okay, generally speaking. All right. Now, I want you to notice something interesting about this brush. Look at the bottom, okay, of every stamp. If I just tap it there for a moment. See this right here? Notice how it is fading, okay, into nothing. This helps with this idea that if I want to scrub and scrub and scrub all over the canvas and cover it with grass, I'm not going to get the bottom of the grass interfering with the blades that rise in front of it, okay? This is an important illusion that helps you to create this feeling of depth with a brush, all right? And so that means it's very easy for me to just do this and for it to look like grass, and I don't have an issue with a stamp overlapping another stamp and making it look weird, because every one of them is fading towards the bottom, and that means its opacity is basically 0 as you get down to the bottom. Now, you all are experts with color dynamics now, and you know what's happening. Why am I getting all this nice variety in the greens? Okay, let's take a look at color dynamics. We have a hue jitter value of 1, so I don't want the color to change so much, but I want the brightness to change. And so we have a brightness jitter set to 5%, and that's just enough to give me that variety. And that's what you're seeing right there. And last, of course, we have flip X jitter, because we're flipping it along the y-axis actually, but the X jitter means flip horizontal. So we're doing a horizontal flip on that stamp, so that sometimes it looks like this, and sometimes it looks like this. Okay, and you can see this particular blade, right? You'll recognize it from this shape and from this shape. Now it's on the left, so everything's been flipped. You'll also notice that this stamp is taller and skinnier than this scamp. A scamp. Why is that? Because, again, we are doing what? We are taking advantage of roundness jitter here. Okay, so it's squishing it. How convenient. Okay, so that would be for like up close, you know, to maybe slightly middle ground grass. What about big fat patches of grass in the distance? Well, this is where you start to create yourself bigger brushes. Okay, you want to make larger brushes for that. So for example, we have one called Grassland and Grassland 2. So here's a big fat brush. It's 1,000 pixels, and you can see from the silhouette what it looks like. It's got a lot of blades of grass up at the top, and at the bottom it just has this kind of random shape. Well, if I just stamp that for you, okay, I want you to look and see, once again, this whole area towards the bottom is fading in opacity down to nothing, which means it's possible for me to just do this. I can just cover an area like this, go up and down, right? And I can just create a nice grassy bit. And the other cool thing is, because this is tied to opacity, we haven't done this yet with any of the brushes we've created, but I'm actually controlling the opacity of the brush with pen pressure as well. That allows me to just gently kind of scrub over an area and make it sort of blend a little bit more and not be so bright. Okay, so let's take a look at this one. Transfer is set to pen pressure. Okay, so my opacity, pen pressure, flow jitter's not on right now. Don't need it, but I have a value of 30% for the lowest possible. Now I could set that down to 0, which means with very light pressure I could do these little hills off in the distance maybe, you know. You want to create some misty kind of effect or whatever. And then as you get closer, get brighter and darker, you know? Those are things you can do. But yeah, you want to cover a big area, use a big brush, and minimize the detail. Here's the Grassland 2 brush. Similar, not quite the same. Right, but very good for just filling in big. When you are painting a big area like this, go ahead, use a cooler green, a little less saturated and a little lighter, right? And just go ahead and fill that in, okay? And then, as you get towards the foreground, you know, use a little bit more pressure, get a little bit darker, right? Then go ahead and make the color a little darker. As you get here closer to the foreground, leave a few little light areas here and there. Okay, but that's going to make that grass look like it's a little closer to you. Okay, go a little darker still, a little warmer even. Maybe this hill is right here, right in front of our faces. Okay, and then you can create this sense of distance and depth in the illustration. Okay, so there's a little tip for you. All right, now what about, you know, trees and things like that? Well, let's think about this. How would you do that? So what you want to do, and let me just do this, we're going to create it from scratch, is I'm just going to use the lasso tool to do this, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a sort of leafy, random canopy shape. Okay? Like this. All right, there's my canopy shape. And it's probably not big enough, but that's okay. We're just gonna go with it. Gonna fill it with black. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my lasso tool here, set it to a feather of about, let's say, I'll try 20% for now, see how that goes. And I'm just going to carve out some shape down here, okay? And just start getting rid of it, like that, okay? I'm going to make it a little smaller now with my feather. Let's see, value of maybe like 8%. Try and get a few leaf shapes in there. I mean, I know they won't translate exactly the way I'm drawing them, but that's okay. I just want to get those in there. No, that doesn't do what I want. Okay. So let's go back a second. There we go. I'm actually going to make my feather even bigger. Or, tell you what, here's something else you could do. I can actually control this with a brush, so why not do that? I like this billow brush. I'm going to set it to clear. And I'm just going to clear out some of this stuff here towards the bottom. I'm not too concerned about that canvasy kind of texture I got there. That's not going to be the end of the world. It's fine. Maybe it'll be kind of interesting, actually. Let's see. All right, now, this is going to be the start of this brush. Okay. I know this is quick and dirty, but you get the idea. All right, now, the other thing I'm going to do to make this a bit more interesting is behind it. Okay, check this out. I'm going to make another shape. Oops, forgot that we're using a feather there. Can make that little shape there, make this little shape here, make a little shape there. And there as well. And I'm going to get rid of anything that's going to mess with my background. I'm going to fill that with black and then reduce its opacity to say, let's say 50%, okay? Maybe even less. Let's try 30%. And I'm going to filter that with a blur. And let's try a Gaussian blur I can control. So we'll get a blur, Gaussian blur, or Gaussian blur. I don't know how you say that word. Does anybody know how to say that one correctly? I'll do like a, let's just do a 1. 1 is fine. It's a little blurry. A little blurry. Shift that over a bit. Okay. Make it a little smaller. I just want it to be kind of hanging out there in the distance. Okay. I'm going to combine these two layers. I just select them both and hit Command E. And now I'm going to do another feather here. I'm going to do like a big one, like a 50%. And I'm just going to hit this bottom area here with one shot like that. Alrighty. Edit. Define brush preset. Treetop. Okay, let's take a look and see if we did something decent here. We're going to take our brush settings. We're going to increase the spacing a little bit. Okay. Shape dynamics. We're going to do some size jitter action there. I'll do pen pressure to control the size. Not going to be too small though, okay? I want to go crazy here. Maybe about 30%. Angle jitter, I'm going to set to like a 6 or a 7. Flip the X jitter. And we are going to try this. Let's see how this goes here. Okay, see that? So that's looking pretty okay. Got some trees off in the distance there. That could work. Now, another thing I want to do, let's go over here to our brush settings and let's turn on transfer. So now I'm controlling it with pen pressure, all right, how bright it is, right? Set that to about 20%. And let us turn on just a bit of scatter. Okay, so it's a little irregular. And then let's come to our color dynamics. All right, we'll increase our brightness jitter and set that hue jitter to just maybe 4%. That's pretty good. And let's see how that goes. So we've got some trees off in the distance there. Okay. Now, a little bit more pressure to add some stuff here in the foreground on top of it. And you can see how we are getting along. All right, see how this is working out? Now, I know this is quick and dirty, but hopefully you get the idea how quickly you can do this, right? And I could create just a few variations of this brush and swap back and forth between, say, 2 or 3 of those, and that'll add just enough variety to get me to where I need to be at the end of the day. Finally, of course, we cannot ignore our good friend Roundness jitter, so let's bump that up. Alrighty. All right, so now slightly different shapes coming into play. Okay, there we go. So those are off in the distance there. These are a bit closer to us. Okay, there's a bunch of treetops there, a little forest action. All right, see how that looks? Not bad, not bad. Okay, now, are you ready for the kicker? Here we go, we got a few minutes left. I wanna show you something cool. And there's more to talk about. I might do another brush hour on more of the foliage stuff because there's certainly more to talk about, but I think we've covered the basics. But check this out, new document. Gonna make it 800 pixels by 800 pixels, okay? So I'm making a square document. And now I'm gonna go to View, Pattern Preview, alrighty? Pattern Preview. Aha, what am I gonna do? Watch this. Oh my gosh. I am gonna generate a leafy background pattern for myself. Pattern Preview allows you to instantly generate a tiling pattern. Tiling pattern, I should say. Okay, let's go ahead and make a lighter value now and just come over the top and create this pattern here. So here is my leafy pattern. Okay, turn off Pattern Preview. How fast is this and amazing, guys? Edit, define pattern, tree tops. Okay, let's go back to this document. Now, I'm just gonna grab plain old round brush like this draw along brush, and I can make it really big. Okay. Don't need shape dynamics for this demonstration here. Don't need this. Okay, we come to our texture here where our patterns are. And right here, see this? This is the most recent one I made. Turn up to 100% here and increase the brightness of that texture. And now I'm just painting with that pattern. Can you see that? That pattern is now in my brush. So if I want to just quickly turn on some color dynamics, grab some green here, hue and brightness jitter, and just fill in some treetops with that pattern. That's what I'm gonna do. Just like that, gang. Make it a little darker here. Insane. Insane, crazy times. That is the power of the pattern preview. That is the power of using a pattern to paint with it. Obviously, again, a quick and dirty example of how it works, but you get the idea and you can then see the power of this because applying that texture to the brushes you've used in the past, for example, the brush I was painting with, right? This guy, for example, right? What if I apply that texture, that pattern to it? Okay, let's do that. Now it's got a pattern built in with that same action, okay? Which means I can use it for all kinds of things. I can set this to pen pressure to control that pattern depth, increase that contrast and that brightness. So less pressure means more of that pattern is going to come through. See that? So I get these nice little interruptions there. Heavier pressure means I'm going to actually paint more on top of it. So even more variety and more action and power there for that brush, which doesn't even talk about dual brush. There's so much more you can do. So folks, I really hope you enjoyed this. Wow, there's more to talk about. I'll do it in the future. Thanks for watching. Check out my draw along show tomorrow at 5:30 p.m. Eastern. Hope to see you there. Everybody take care of yourselves, take care of each other. Remember to be kind, and I'm going to say ciao for now.